Good morning, Alex and friends. I'm Grace. Today is Friday, August 15th, 2025, and you're listening to Alex's News. The weather in Riverside today brings a high of 87.2 degrees Fahrenheit and a low of 66.1 degrees. A comfortable day to be outdoors, perhaps enjoying the last full weeks of summer. Coming up on Alex's News, we'll be looking at the diplomatic efforts involving Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin as they try to bring the Ukraine war to an end. We'll explore what details to watch for in those discussions. Plus, we'll delve into the complexities behind the disputes over how federal lands are managed in the face of increasing wildfires. All this and more coming up on Alex's News. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our top story this morning, August 15th, 2025. All eyes are on Anchorage, Alaska, today, where United States President Donald Trump and Russian President Vladimir Putin are set to meet for a truly high-stakes summit. This isn't just another diplomatic gathering. It's being framed as a critical effort to address, and perhaps even end, Russia's more than 3-year-long war in Ukraine. For more on this pivotal event, we turn to our seasoned reporter, Ethan. Ethan, tell us, what makes this meeting so significant?
Grace, it's a landmark event on multiple fronts. This is the first standalone summit between President Trump and President Putin since their 2018 meeting in Helsinki. According to reporting from Al Jazeera, NPR, and BBC News, it also marks President Putin's first visit to the United States in a decade, and notably, the first time a Russian leader has ever set foot in Alaska. So truly historic on several levels.
That's quite a list of firsts, Ethan, and the location itself, Anchorage, Alaska, particularly Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, seems to be a key player here. Why was this specific venue chosen for such an important discussion?
You're right, Grace. The venue is a crucial element. Joint Base Elmendorf-Richardson, or JBER as it's known, is a massive U.S. military installation on the northern edge of Anchorage. White House officials, as BBC News has reported, selected it primarily for its robust security capabilities. They also noted a lack of other suitable options during Anchorage's incredibly busy summer tourism season. Beyond that, the remote and high-security environment of JBER makes it an ideal site to avoid any potential protests, according to Al Jazeera. JBER itself is Alaska's largest military base, spanning 64,000 acres, and it has deep historical roots, tracing back to the Cold War. Built in 1940, it was vital for air defense against Soviet threats, even earning the nickname Top Cover for North America. Over 30,000 people reside on the base, so it's a bustling military hub. Despite Alaska's typically frigid winters, the forecast for today is a comparatively pleasant 16 degrees Celsius, or 61 degrees Fahrenheit.
It sounds like an unbearable choice for anyone hoping to disrupt the talks. Given Alaska's unique history, particularly its sale from Russia to the U.S., does the choice of location hold any deeper symbolic or historical weight for these two leaders?
Absolutely, Grace. It's a fascinating layer to this meeting. The U.S. purchased Alaska from Russia in 1867, a historical fact highlighted by both BBC News and Al Jazeera. Russian presidential assistant Yuri Ushakov described the geographical proximity, with only the Bering Strait separating the two nations, as a logical reason for the choice. Interestingly, Moscow is reportedly leveraging that 19th century sale of Alaska by Tsarist Russia to America as a strategic justification for its own attempts to change borders by force in the 21st century. It's almost as if they're trying to break the ice with a bit of historical precedent, if you will. Anchorage also has a recent history of hosting high-level talks, having previously been the site of a contentious U.S.-China diplomatic meeting in March 2021.
That's quite a historical backdrop. Now, let's talk logistics. What's the schedule for today's talks, and how long do we expect this summit to run?
Well, President Trump was expected to depart the White House for Anchorage at 0645 Eastern Daylight Time. The main face-to-face discussions between President Trump and President Putin are scheduled to begin around 11.
So a packed day ahead. Let's delve into the why behind this summit. What are President Trump's primary objectives for coming to Alaska?
President Trump's motivations are quite clear, Grace. His primary objective is to claim progress toward peace and fulfill a key 2024 presidential campaign promise to end the Ukraine war in a matter of days or within 24 hours of taking office. He openly desires to be remembered as a peacemaker and has expressed interest in a Nobel Peace Prize, as reported by BBC News. He expressed disappointment with Putin last month, and after an August 8th ceasefire deadline passed, this August 15th meeting was announced. While the White House initially described it as a, quote, listening exercise or a, quote, feel-out session, downplaying immediate ceasefire expectations, Trump later expressed renewed optimism about a potential deal. He did state there was a 25% chance the meeting would not be successful. On Thursday, according to Al Jazeera, Trump issued a warning that Russia could face serious consequences if Putin did not agree to a ceasefire. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated the immediate goal is a ceasefire, with a wider peace deal requiring more time to address security guarantees and territorial disputes, as detailed by BBC News. Trump has also acknowledged that he initially thought this war would be the, quote, easiest to solve, but now finds it actually the most difficult.
So he's hoping to make a diplomatic splash, perhaps thaw some of those frosty relations. What about President Putin? What is Russia's main goal for participating in this summit?
President Putin's primary goal, Grace, is largely about international recognition and demonstrating that Western efforts to isolate him have failed. The mere fact of this high-level meeting and the announced joint press conference serves as proof, in his eyes, that Russia is, quote, back at the top table of global politics, according to BBC News. Beyond recognition, Putin seeks outright victory on the ground. He demands that Russia retain all the land it has seized and occupied in 4 Ukrainian regions, specifically Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhia, and Kherson, and that Kyiv withdraw from the parts of those regions still under Ukrainian control. An analyst suggested that Putin's central objective is Ukraine's geopolitical neutralization, including demands for Ukraine's neutrality and influence over the future size of Ukraine's army. The Kremlin's strategy, according to BBC News, is that if Trump supports these territorial demands, Ukraine's inevitable rejection could lead to Trump cutting all support for Kyiv, thereby boosting U.S.-Russia relations and economic cooperation. Despite economic pressures on Russia, there is currently no indication Putin plans to compromise.
It's clear both leaders have very different agendas. A critical point of contention, or rather absence, is Ukraine itself. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is not expected to attend. Can you elaborate on this exclusion and Ukraine's reaction?
Grace, this is indeed a major point of criticism. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is reportedly not attending the meeting because President Putin had specifically requested his exclusion, a fact confirmed by BBC News and Al Jazeera. This decision has drawn sharp criticism from European leaders and President Zelensky himself. Trump has stated he would call Zelensky after the summit. Zelensky, who met virtually with Trump and European leaders on Wednesday, has consistently insisted that any agreements made without Ukraine's input would be, quote, dead decisions. He has stressed that talks about us without us will not work for Ukraine, and has warned of new sanctions on Russia if a ceasefire is not immediately agreed upon, as reported by Al Jazeera. Interestingly, Trump has expressed interest in a potential second meeting in Alaska soon that would include both Putin and Zelensky.
That sounds like a potential follow-up, but for now it's just the two of them. So given Ukraine's firm stance against ceding any territory, how do President Trump's desired outcomes align with these strong objections? It sounds like a diplomatic Gordian knot.
It absolutely is, Grace. Untangling this will be the ultimate test. Trump aims to, quote, get some of that Russian-occupied territory back for Ukraine. But he has also suggested there might need to be, quote, some swapping, changes in land. According to BBC News, a CBS News report indicated that the Trump administration has been exploring a ceasefire deal where Russia would keep Crimea, which it illegally occupied since 2014, and the Donbas region, but relinquish control of Kherson and Zaporizhia. However, Ukraine has firmly rejected any notion of ceding territory, including Crimea and the Donbas region. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has stated Putin's demands are, quote, unacceptable, as BBC News has highlighted. This bilateral U.S.-Russia negotiation framework directly conflicts with Ukraine's established multilateral peace process based on its 10-point peace formula. This formula, first presented in November 2022, demands the complete withdrawal of Russian troops from all of Ukraine's internationally recognized territory, including Crimea, and the restoration of Ukraine's territorial integrity in accordance with the UN Charter as a non-negotiable starting point, information verifiable through Wikipedia and mfa.gov.ua. Ukraine views its formula as the quote, only efficient plan for ending the war, as noted by harvard.edu. Negotiating a peace settlement without the direct participation and consent of Ukraine fundamentally undermines its sovereignty and self-determination, potentially sidelining international consensus. Any agreement reached without Ukraine's direct involvement and explicit consent would simply lack legitimacy in the eyes of Ukraine and many of its international partners.
It's a complicated web indeed. Beyond the urgent issue of Ukraine, are there other topics on the agenda for today's summit? And who is accompanying President Putin on his delegation?
Yes, Grace, beyond Ukraine, the agenda for the summit also includes broader discussions on peace and security, along with other pressing international and regional issues, including trade and economic cooperation, as Al Jazeera and Politico.eu have reported. The Russian delegation accompanying President Putin is quite significant, including Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, Defense Minister Andrei Belousov, Finance Minister Anton Silvanov, Presidential Aide Yuri Ushakov, and Special Presidential Envoy on Foreign Investment and Economic Cooperation Kirill Dmitriev. While U.S. delegation members have not been fully disclosed, Secretary of State Marco Rubio was mentioned in pre-meeting discussions with Lavrov. Experts suggest that while this summit could initiate a peace deal, it is highly unlikely to end the war entirely.
Ethan, thank you for breaking down the complexities of this crucial summit today. We appreciate your insights into these icy diplomatic waters. That was reporter Ethan with the latest on the U.S.-Russia summit in Alaska. We'll be sure to bring you updates as they come in. And coming up next, we have Story 2 of 2. We turn now to a burning issue gripping the nation as wildfires rage across the American West and beyond. The Trump administration is pushing for a sweeping overhaul of federal wildfire response, a move that is igniting a fiery debate in Washington. For more on this, we go to our reporter Chloe. Chloe, what's the administration's main goal here?
Grace, the administration, as NPR, KUOW, and KBBI have reported, is aiming to consolidate federal wildfire response resources into a brand new agency. They call it the Federal Wildland Fire Service, or USWFS, which would be housed under the U.S. Interior Department. Their argument, according to internationalfireandsafetyjournal.com, is that the current system is spread too thin, leading to, quote, dispersed, duplicative, and ineffective structures, quote. They believe centralizing efforts will streamline operations.
So it's about putting all their fire eggs in one basket, so to speak. What specific actions has the president taken to move this vision forward?
Precisely, Grace. A significant step was the executive order titled, quote, Empowering Common Sense Wildfire Prevention and Response, quote, signed on June 12, 2025. This order, as whitehouse.gov and CBS News confirm, directs the Departments of Agriculture and the Interior to consolidate their wildland fire programs. Furthermore, the proposed budget for fiscal year 2026 outlines a major shift of funding and thousands of personnel from the U.S. Forest Service to this new USWFS, a detail highlighted by the Associated Press and the Columbian.
And beyond just reorganizing personnel, is the administration looking to change how our forests are managed overall?
Absolutely. According to reporting from The Guardian and The Washington Post, an executive action in March 2025 mandated a focus on increasing logging on federal lands, aiming for a 25% rise in timber production, simultaneously aimed at reducing forest fire risks. This shift also involves redirecting the Forest Service's scientific work towards timber and wildfire management, moving away from broader ecological research. There's also a controversial plan to rescind the, quote, roadless rule, quote, which currently prohibits logging on millions of acres of national forest land. Agriculture Secretary Brooke Rollins called this rule, quote, absurd, quote, saying its removal would allow for, quote, proper management, quote, against fires, as Inside Climate News has reported.
So, a lot of changes on the horizon, but Chloe, the administration says resources are, quote, nearly maxed out, quote. Is this primarily due to bureaucratic inefficiencies, or is there more to the story?
While inefficiency is cited, Grace, the data points to severe staffing shortages as the primary reason federal wildfire response resources are, quote, nearly maxed out, quote, as The Guardian and Forest Policy publication have highlighted. As of today, August 15, 2025, over 530 personnel are assigned to 35 large wildfires nationwide. Massive blazes like the 143, 489-acre Dragon Bravo fire in Grand Canyon National Park are truly demanding critical resources. GoVEXEC.com reported that through July 26, 417 nationwide requests for crucial fire resources went unfilled.
Those are immense fires. What's causing this significant staffing crunch, and how serious is it?
It's very serious, Grace, marked by an exodus of experienced personnel. Between 2021 and 2024, the Forest Service reportedly lost nearly half of its permanent employees, with about 7,500 departures, according to the Associated Press. The Los Angeles Times described this attrition rate as an, quote, exodus, quote, at 45% over the past 3 years. As of July 2025, over 100 firefighting positions remained unfilled, representing more than a quarter of the agency's firefighting force.
And the reasons behind this significant brain drain?
Low base pay, as low as $15 per hour, is a major factor, along with insufficient hazard pay and retirement benefits. There's also severe burnout and escalating job hazards. Critics argue that while the Biden administration tried to address staffing, the current administration's proposed fiscal year 2026 budget cuts overall USFS funding by 65% and seeks to eliminate funding for critical firefighting programs, which they contend only deepens the crisis.
So the staffing situation is dire, and the proposed budget cuts aren't helping. What's Congress saying about all of this? Are they on board with the administration's consolidation plan?
Far from it, Grace. Both the House and Senate Appropriations Committees are, quote, trying to tap the brakes, quote, on these plans, as reported by NPR. They've explicitly rejected the administration's proposal to transfer the Forest Service's firefighting duties to the Interior Department. The House Appropriations Committee has even ordered a Government Accountability Office study on the consolidation, with the report not expected until March 2026, which is about 7 months from now. This effectively stalls the creation of the new service through the budgetary process.
It sounds like Congress is putting up a pretty strong firewall against these changes. What are their main arguments against this consolidation, especially during an active fire season?
They have several strong points. First, they argue that rushing a major reorganization right now could be chaotic and costly, potentially increasing the risk of catastrophic fires. Senator Ron Wyden of Oregon, for example, warned that the lack of emergency preparation could cost lives. As reported by Politico Pro. Second, lawmakers argue that the significant staffing cuts have, quote, dangerously hampered, quote, the Forest Service's ability to fight wildfires. Senator Patty Murray of Washington, according to Senate.gov, has directly questioned USFS Chief Tom Schultz on the agency's readiness, stating that, quote, the stakes are life and death here, quote.
And what about the long-term impact on the Forest Service itself?
Former federal officials are worried about, quote, hollowing out, quote, the USFS. They argue that removing firefighting operations could divorce the agency from broader, integrated forest management goals like thinning and prescribed burns, thereby undermining its historical mission. A group of 7 former Forest Service chiefs explicitly opposed creating a new wildfire agency, urging instead investment in the existing interagency fire management system to avoid a, quote, costly and redundant new agency, quote. A point emphasized by High Country News.
It sounds like the general consensus from Congress and experts is that consolidation isn't the silver bullet. What are the experts recommending to truly address these capacity constraints?
You're absolutely right, Grace. Experts largely agree that reorganization alone won't solve the fundamental issues of insufficient staffing and funding, as The Guardian has highlighted. They propose a multifaceted approach. First, workforce development and support are crucial, implementing permanent, competitive increases in wildland firefighter pay, ensuring it counts towards overtime, hazard pay, and retirement. Also, providing enhanced benefits like housing stipends and comprehensive mental health programs.
So focusing on the people on the ground. What else?
Second, enhanced coordination and funding. Experts advocate for improved coordination across all federal, state, tribal, and local jurisdictions, along with increased and flexible funding for wildland firefighting. And third, a big focus on prevention, mitigation, and adaptation. This means ramping up fuel management strategies like thinning and prescribed burns, strengthening policies for land use planning in wildfire-prone areas, and promoting fire-resilient building codes.
Chloe, that's a comprehensive look at a complex and very serious issue. Thank you for cutting through the smoke and giving us such clear insight.
My pleasure, Grace.
Here are some other headlines. First, to the Middle East, where tensions are quite literally building. Israel's far-right finance minister announced the country is pushing forward with a highly contentious settlement project known as E1. Critics warn the plan, which includes over 400 new housing units, will effectively sever the occupied West Bank, creating a continuous block of Israeli settlements and making a two-state solution physically impossible. The minister unabashedly stated the move would, quote, bury the idea of a Palestinian state, drawing swift condemnation from the European Union, the United Nations, and Palestinian leaders, who called it a crime of annexation. Across the globe in China, the economy appears to be hitting a great wall of worry. Data from July shows a significant slowdown in factory output, retail sales, and investment. The slump is being blamed on a 1-2 punch of persistent pressure from U.S. tariffs and a deepening crisis in the nation's vast property market, which is proving to be a tough nut to crack. The housing downturn has zapped consumer confidence, and a slight rise in urban unemployment is adding to the deflationary pressure. Meanwhile, on the Korean peninsula, South Korea's new president is trying to clean up a messy situation with his northern neighbor. President Lee Jae-myung has pledged to restore a 2018 military agreement with North Korea, which was designed to prevent accidental clashes along their heavily fortified border. The pact was suspended by the previous government after Pyongyang sent hundreds of trash-filled balloons across the border. President Lee is now urging Pyongyang to return to dialogue in a bid to de-escalate soaring tensions. In the world of finance, it was a tale of two markets today. On Wall Street, stocks stumbled after a hotter-than-expected wholesale inflation report. The data has investors worried that the Federal Reserve may have to keep interest rates higher for longer, and it seems those fears are taxing investors' patience. In contrast, most international markets saw gains, with Japan's Nikkei 225 surging 1.7% after the country reported better-than-expected economic growth. And finally, a global effort to tackle plastic pollution has been trashed. Marathon negotiations in Geneva for a landmark treaty collapsed without an agreement. Hopes for a legally binding pact became bottled up as a coalition of nearly 100 nations, demanding limits on plastic production clashed with oil and plastic-producing countries who favored voluntary recycling measures. After 10 chaotic days, the talks were abruptly suspended with no clear path forward, leaving the future of a global response to the plastic crisis in limbo. That's all we have for now. Today's episode was made by Alexander King with Claude Sonnet 4.0, Gemini Pro 2.5, Gemini Flash 2.5, and Google Cloud Text-to-Speech. I hope you have a great day. I'll see you tomorrow, Alex.